Good morning once again, everybody. I want to welcome all of our friends joining us online. We are wrapping up today 6 weeks. We've been in a journey that we've called Together in Faith. And we've been focusing on the growth of our faith together. And it's been just a wonderful, wonderful journey together. We're wrapping it up today. And I just want to share with you, I've got a stack of these cards that's like this high of just feedback from you guys about the things that God has been doing in your life and in your relationship with God over the 6 weeks together. Just a couple of highlights. One man wrote, Together in Faith has renewed my hunger to take time every day to start my day with a dose of God's word and a time of prayer. It's helped my attitude and my overall mood as I go through my day. Pastor Dave, I've been praying and asking for prayers for my mom for the last couple of weeks. She's been struggling with her health and finances over the last few weeks, but she has improved greatly and just received a great financial blessing just last night. Thank you for your prayers. Pastor Dave, I've been felt pushed and motivated to get baptized for quite a while now, and during these weeks of Together in Faith, and through the encouragement of my small group, I am signed up to get baptized on October the 29th, and I am super excited about it. Pastor Dave, wow, what a profound and piercing 6 weeks of my life. God spoke to me in many ways during my Bible study time. Pastor Dave, the season of renewing the foundation of faith has been a blessing and of enormous value. The daily devotions have encouraged me to re-examine my works in faith, and my faith is stronger and I'm more centered in the will of God. Pastor Dave, I'm so thankful and grateful that God is transforming me out of a life of sin. He's been filling that empty place in my life that I've been missing for so long. I mean, it's just so encouraging to hear how God responds when we reach out to him in faith. And as we wrap up this series today, I think it's really important that we not look at the completion of this 6-week focus as any sort of finish line. This is actually, for some of you, maybe the beginning of a journey of faith, but certainly if you're walking with Jesus and you have a relationship with God, this is just a continuation of that journey. And if we're going to continue to grow in faith throughout our relationship with God, it's really important that we understand what we're going to focus on today, because it's one of the challenging and one of the most necessary areas for our spiritual growth, and that is learning to wait on God. So important to the growth of our faith. Now, I don't think anybody likes to wait. Is there anybody here who enjoys waiting? I would love to meet you, ask for your autograph, maybe. You're like a special saintly person. I don't think anybody likes to wait, whether it's traffic or checkout lines or a canceled flight. And the problem is that the technology that surrounds us has made us even more impatient. All the modern conveniences, all the instant everything has made waiting even more challenging for all of us. Yet, God sees seasons of waiting as critical and even necessary for the growth of our faith in him. It's how he grows our character and how he develops our faith. Now, how many of you would agree that every young child at some point needs to learn the difference between no and not yet? Right? That's really important. That's really a milestone in maturity when a kid understands that. They aren't the same thing, but an immature child doesn't know the difference between no and not yet. The inability to wait, the inability to delay gratification is why we have buried ourselves in debt. Our inability to delay gratification and wait sexually is the reason for all kinds of societal problems, relational problems, unwanted pregnancies, you name it. Just on down the list, our inability or unwillingness to wait causes all kinds of problems in our lives. Now, God will allow us to wait for two primary reasons. He's not wanting us to suffer. He's not just wanting us to go through a hard time. How many of you know that God loves you? Do you understand that? Do you know that God has your best interests at heart? He really does. So when he allows us to wait, there's a reason for that. He has a purpose in those delays. So we need to realize that if we're in God's waiting room, and I'm quite sure that pretty much everybody in this room is waiting on God in some area of our lives. God allows us to wait, first of all, because he does not want to become a vending machine. And if God answered every prayer instantly, that's exactly how we would treat him. And he doesn't want to be seen as some genie in a bottle who's granted you 3 wishes and you just get whatever you want. What he wants more than anything is a relationship with us. He wants us to trust him and he wants us to know him. And he will allow seasons of waiting to test and to stretch our faith. That's the primary reason, is that he wants to develop our character. And there's no other way to learn certain lessons of faith without seasons of waiting. Here's the key jumping off verse for today, James chapter 5 and verse 7. I wonder if we're going to read it out loud together. There's so much here, but we're just going to deal with this topic generally. Everybody, come on, nice and loud. Let's read it together. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. I think it's really important, that first sentence, because this is really where we are. We are waiting the Lord's coming. We can see in the news all that's happening in the world. We're in the last part of the last days. And what he says is, in these difficult and challenging times in particular, what we need more than anything is patience. Patience, endurance, a grounded trust in God that no matter what comes, no matter what happens, no matter what craziness we see in the news or in our world, that God is in control and that he will keep every promise that he's made to us. Today we're going to answer 2 questions. Number 1, what to remember while we're waiting. And then number 2, what to do while we're waiting on God. Now, it takes a lot of faith to take a step of faith, to step out there and take action. That's often how we think about faith, is taking a risk. And it takes faith to take a risk to trust God. But I think it even takes more faith to wait. When we don't see what's happening, we don't understand the reason for delay, we don't really know how this is going to turn out, because it seems like that God has completely forgotten us, because we don't see visible progress. That's where our faith is really tested. Quickly, a few things here that we need to remember. Number 1, that there's a natural delay between planting and harvesting. This was the whole message, the whole teaching last week, this natural delay between the season of planting and the season of harvesting, between sowing and reaping. So just to remind you, you don't take orange seed, plant it in your backyard in the morning, and then in the afternoon go pick oranges off the tree. That's not how it works. You don't reap in the same season that you plant. There's always a delay. Ecclesiastes, we looked at this verse last week. It's a very familiar passage from a popular song in the 60s and 70s. Ecclesiastes 3, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. And part of that is a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to scatter and a time to gather in. Now, many of you have been planting seeds over these past 6 weeks. Some have planted financial seeds. Some have seeds of service, seeds of sacrifice, seeds of kindness, seeds of faithfulness, seeds of patience. The Bible says what you sow, what you plant, you will reap. But I just need to remind you that you won't see the harvest immediately. We harvest in a different season than we plant. So in the meantime, what do? We wait patiently. We trust expectantly. And in faith, we wait to see the faithfulness of God in our lives. So remember this natural delay between planting and harvesting. Second thing to remember, God is preparing me for his blessing and for the answer. While I'm waiting, God is not only working on the situation to bring the answer to that prayer, but he's also working on me to prepare me to receive the answer. So when you ask for something in your life, God has a bigger agenda than just that particular thing. He not only wants to answer that prayer, but he wants to develop and grow your character as well as grow your faith in him. He wants to get you ready. And he's more interested in your character than your comfort. I don't know if you've learned that yet, but he's more interested in us growing up than us having everything that we want from him immediately. He wants to stretch our faith. So 1 Peter 1 puts it this way: in all this you greatly rejoice, though for a little while you may have to suffer grief and all kinds of trials. These have come, so the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So there's something good that comes through testing. And our faith, when it's tested, is going to be purified. Now, some of you are going through the fire right now, this refining process. And if you're going through that, my biggest encouragement to you is to keep going. It's like this old quote from Winston Churchill. I love it. He says, if you're going through hell, keep going. Don't stop. Keep moving. And if you see that your faith is being tested or refined by fiery trials, keep trusting him. Keep moving forward. Allow your faith to be refined because it's more valuable than pure gold. And this is what God is up to in your life in seasons of waiting. In fact, we just need to know that while we're waiting, God is working. These troubles, these trials, the testing, the purification of our faith comes through this waiting that is a test. Tests our character, tests our faith, our trust, and our endurance. Third thing to remember is that I'm in good company when I'm waiting on God. You're not alone. Millions of believers have found themselves in God's waiting room over generations. And this room right now is filled with people who are waiting on God's answer in their life in some area. Hebrews 11:2 says, faith is the reason we remember great people who lived in the past. And Hebrews is the book that records for us God's hall of fame of faith. These great men and women of God who we admire and we respect, and we talk about their faith as an example to all of us. Every one of them had to endure long seasons of waiting between God's promise and God's fulfillment of his promise in their life. We don't have time to get into each of their stories, but Hannah, Joseph, Moses, Abraham, when you look at their lives, they each endured long seasons of waiting. That is the reason why we commend and we celebrate their faith. How about Noah, whose faith was tested for 120 years? God told him, I'm going to destroy the earth, Noah. I'm going to judge this earth and start over. I want you to build this large ship, and I'm going to give you the instructions. And I know you live in the desert, and I know you're not near a port, but here's what's going to happen. I'm going to send rain from the sky. And Noah said, Lord, what's rain? Because it had never rained before. Before the flood, the Bible says the vegetation was watered through a mist that would rise up from the ground like a ground fog, and there had never been precipitation from the sky in the form of rain the way we know it today. That was the environment before the flood. So God's talking about stuff that made no sense to Noah. He didn't understand rain. He didn't understand how a boat like this of this size was necessary in the middle of the desert, but he just said, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you. And do you know he worked on that boat, he and his family, for 120 years. So think about that area that you're waiting on God to answer or to provide or respond. And let me just ask you, would you be willing to wait on God for 120 years? God knows what he's doing in your life. And I know how hard it is to wait. I could tell you testimony in my own personal life of many seasons, long seasons of waiting, but then I always saw the faithfulness of God. Gina and I, when we wanted to have children, 7 years of an infertility waiting room. Could not get pregnant, no physical reasons why for either one of us it wasn't happening, but it wasn't God's time. Now, once Gina got pregnant with Brittany, it was like baby time. Boom, boom, boom. Number 2 and number 3 just came very quickly. But we had a long wait. It was difficult. It was challenging for our faith, and particularly for Gina. This is how God works. He's asking, will you and can you trust me? And when you're in that season, just know that you're not alone. Just know that this is not something strange or unusual. God has not forgotten about you. God's not blessing other people and you're just kind of, in the dunce cap in the corner. God doesn't like you. No, he does this in the life of every true believer. He will allow us to wait. You're in good company. Number 4, write this one down. Remember, God always keeps his promises. How many of you believe that today? God always keeps his promises. Come on, man. He is faithful. And this is the most important thing to remember when you're waiting on God. Unlike people, you can count on God to come through. So when you're waiting, don't focus on what you can't do or what you don't have. Focus on what God can do. And the best way to focus on what God can do is to focus on the promises that he has made in the Bible for believers. So shift your focus from your limited abilities and focus on God's unlimited ability in your life. Galatians 6:9 says this, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time, everybody say proper time, at the proper time we will, not might, not maybe, we will reap a harvest, and then here's the qualifier, if we do not give up. This is where our faith is challenged, is to keep trusting, keep believing, keep standing on the promises of God until we see the faithfulness of God in action. So these are the things that we should remember. Now, let's quickly talk about what we need to do. Now, for guys, this is kind of how we're wired. We want to do something. We want to take some action. And there are some actions of faith that are really important for all of us. And we're going to use the word wait as an acrostic, W-A-I-T, in terms of the things that we should do while we're waiting on God. Write these down. First of all, W, write down the lessons I'm learning. Really important. Write down the lessons that I'm learning while I'm in this season of waiting. See, when you're waiting on God, God is working in your faith, and there are lessons that he wants to teach you. What's important is that we listen and absorb those lessons that he's wanting to teach us while we're waiting on him. Some people, some of you maybe have experienced the same problematic circumstances like 24 times, over and over again. God, why do I keep coming back to the same type of problem? Why am I dealing with the same type of pain? Why do I feel like I'm in this cycle that just can't be broken? And I guess the question for us is, have you learned the lessons that God is trying to teach you through those circumstances? See, God's wanting you to absorb those lessons so you don't have to deal with that situation for a 25th time. But he's going to allow the circumstances to continue to come because he's wanting to teach you. And sometimes the only way we're going to be teachable is through the school of hard knocks and pain and delays, and we need to learn to absorb those lessons. And the best way to remember is to write things down, to be deliberate, to be introspective, and to really be thoughtful about what God is teaching us while we're waiting. A great example of this is Moses and the people of Israel. People of Israel were in Egyptian slavery for hundreds of years. God sends Moses to lead them out of slavery. Miraculously, God intervenes through all of these great plagues of Egypt. The most powerful nation of the world, the most powerful ruler of the world, Pharaoh, chooses to let the people of Israel go. God's intention was that God was going to lead them to their own land, the promised land, where he would be their people, and he would set them apart to him and fulfill this great promise that out of slavery they would have their own nation. Now, if you look at a map, the distance from Egypt to Israel, to this land of promise that God had in mind for his people, by foot, which is how they were traveling, it should have only taken a few weeks for them to walk to that promised land. But here's what happened. In that season of waiting between when they were set free as slaves to the day they were going to walk into that promised land, there was a period of delay. They were going to have to travel through the wilderness. And in that season of waiting, God had some tests of their faith along the way. The problem was they failed each of those tests quite horribly. They turned their back on God. They whined and said, Lord, why are we out here in the middle of the desert? They didn't like the food that God miraculously provided for them, so they whined about that. I mean, you just name it, and they turned their back on God. They were stubborn and unteachable, and they were rebellious. They were blind to their issues. They would not trust the Lord. They would not keep their eyes on him. They worshiped other gods. They started worshiping the false gods that they learned about while they were in Egypt. Finally, God said, listen, we're going to keep walking around this desert until you guys figure this out. So each time they would fail a test, he's like, all right, another lap, another lap, another lap in the desert. Till finally he said, listen, I'm done. None of you are going to go into the promised land. All of you are going to die off. Your kids are going to be able to go, but you are not because of your stubborn, hardened hearts towards me, your rebellious, unfaithful hearts. See, God's very, very patient. Is anybody thankful for God's patience? I know I am. He's very long-suffering. He is very, very patient. But there's an end and a limit to God's patience. You need to understand that. There are times where God is done, and then it's judgment time, and that's what they experienced. So he waited for that unfaithful generation to die off in the desert, and then their children were the ones who had the opportunity to experience God's promise in their life. So I told you all that to tell you this, that some of you, while you're waiting, it feels like a wilderness. And in fact, the only way to experience God's promise is through some sort of wilderness. And usually that wilderness is some sort of delay, some season of waiting. And that period of time has a purpose. God's wanting to teach you. He's wanting to grow your faith in him. He's wanting to teach you to trust him, not treat him like a vending machine, but to really walk in a relationship with him. So the key is to absorb those faith lessons while we're waiting. To know those things and absorb those things God's wanting to teach us. Deuteronomy 11 says, remember what you have learned about the Lord through your experiences with him. The best way to incorporate personal lessons is through a prayer journal. This has been transformational in my relationship with Jesus. In fact, my brain tends to be very ADD. I'll start to pray and my mind wanders. I'm just everywhere. I have so much going on in my brain. So I found by just having a prayer journal, I literally write out my prayers to God each morning, like a letter to God. And then I have an area where I pray over particular things and I write down different insights and things that God's teaching and showing me. And this is the best tool for your spiritual growth, in particular when you're in seasons of waiting. I went back this week knowing what I was going to be teaching you, and I started looking at my spiritual journey through my journal, and I can't tell you how many times I was writing out things that God was showing me and teaching me through things that I was going through in my life at that time. And this is such a valuable tool in the growth of your relationship with God. Now, a prayer journal is not the same thing as a diary. In a diary, you're going to say, okay, yesterday, God, or diary, dear diary, not God, dear diary, I had a mocha frappuccino, okay, or whatever you did that day. All right, that's not what we're talking about. A diary is for the events of your day. A journal is about your spiritual journey. It's about recording the lessons that God is wanting to teach you and your heart expression to him as well. The most valuable prayer you can pray while you're waiting on God is, Lord, what do you want to teach me? What do you want to show me? What are the things that you want to incorporate into my life of faith where you're asking me to trust you more? How many of you enjoyed that last song that we just sang in the worship set? I love that part of it that said, I depend on you. And we just said it over and over, just kind of meditating on that idea. Lord, I depend on you. Sometimes you don't know that Jesus is all you need until he's all you have. And it's in seasons of lack, it's in seasons of waiting, it's in seasons of waiting for that prayer to be answered that you learn that he is really all you need. So trust him. Lord, teach me. Remember those lessons. Secondly, act as though you already have it. This is what you do. Act as though you already have that thing that you're asking God for. This is called faith. Jesus put it this way in Mark 11. He said, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. See, understand that is the past tense. Believe that you have received it. Gratitude is thanking God once you have already received it. Hope you did that this morning as we were singing songs and just reflecting about the goodness of God in your life. All that is provided, all the good things that we enjoy. Lord, thank you. That's what we do. Part of our worship is just saying thank you to God for his goodness and for his blessings, all of his graces in our lives. He's so faithful. We say thank you. But see, that's gratitude, not faith. Gratitude is thanking God after we have received. Faith is thanking God before we have received it. God, I thank you that you will provide. And I'm as happy about it as though I already have it. I'm grateful. I'm thankful. I'm trusting you before I've even physically received it. This is what faith is. This is how you wait. This is how you wait in faith. Now, what we tend to do while we're waiting is we wonder, when is this going to happen? God, why is this happening to me? Why are you taking so long? I'm just talking about my own attitude sometimes, okay? Maybe you can relate to this. But we wonder, we worry. God, is this really going to happen? Are you really going to keep your promises to me? So we wonder, we worry, we whine. God, would you like a little cheese with that wine? Dave, you got that out? You got that out of your system. I'm glad you just get all that whining out. That's how we normally approach God, wondering and worrying and whining while we're waiting. Jesus is saying there's a better way. That's to wait in faith. Thank God in faith. Act like you've already received what he's promised and just give him thanks ahead of time. In wait, is what else we do, is that we imitate the habits that strengthen your faith. Imitate the habits that strengthen your faith. We can look at strong people of faith and imitate those habits. How do they respond to God? How do they deal with challenges that come into their life? What are their patterns? What are their habits? And we can follow their examples. We can also look at the great men and women of faith in the Bible and learn from them. What are the things that I can follow and incorporate into my life and trust in Jesus? But I can also learn from the mistakes that they made. And I love that the Bible records even the mistakes and the imperfections of the great men and women of faith, because we can learn from those as well. Imitate those habits. Now, there are specific habits that produce strong faith, that are the foundation of our faith. And it's very important that regardless of what season we're in, that we develop consistency in the basics. So that, hey, when I'm discouraged and I'm frustrated and I don't see things taking place, I'm not going to check out of life and check out on God. I'm going to stay faithful to those core things. This is really important. Would you please write this down if you're taking notes? In general, while you're waiting, don't put your life on hold. And I see a lot of Christians doing that. Particular prayers not being answered, things we don't see outward progress, and so we just kind of check out. Well, we just get down, we get discouraged, whatever, we're disappointed with God, we're frustrated, and I see so many people will check out in those moments. Don't put your life on hold. Waiting is active, not passive. The Bible says there are some core things to keep doing that are just foundational to our faith. Write these down. The first is keep on praying. Keep on praying. Matthew 7:7, Jesus said, and it will be given to you. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. Now, in the original language, of course, the Bible is not written in English. It's been translated for us in English. The tense of the verbs here in the original language are in a continual sense. So the most literal way of reading this is, keep on asking and it'll be given. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be opened to you. So it's not a time to get passive when I don't feel like my prayers are being answered. Continue to pray. Continue to seek God. This is foundational. Don't stop. Don't get discouraged. Secondly, keep on serving. Keep on serving. Never be lacking in spiritual zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Again, so many Christians, when we're frustrated, we're feeling discouraged. Oh, well, things aren't happening in my life. My prayers aren't being answered. And again, they just detach. Let me tell you, one of the most invigorating things for your faith is to get your eyes off of yourself and onto the needs of other people. In fact, consider becoming the answer to someone else's prayer, and you'll experience a blessing that you'll not experience any other way. Continue to selflessly serve others. These are just core things. Regardless of what season of life you're in, faithful, successful people of faith, you'll find them doing these things in every season of their walk with Jesus. Here's the next one. Keep on going to church in small group. Avoid that temptation to just check out when you're feeling discouraged, when you're in a season of waiting. Hebrews 10:25, don't give up your habit of meeting with other believers. Instead, keep on encouraging each other. This is so foundational. So many of you over these past 6 weeks have made a commitment that, you know what, I'm going to be faithful to worship on Sunday mornings and make it a habit. There'll be a couple of times a year where I'm doing something I just can't physically be in church. But if I can physically be in church, I'm going to be with God's people on Sundays because this is a command of God. And I just want to high five every one of you who have made this a core commitment in your life. Now, there are others of you during the 6 weeks also committed to being in a small group. Being really connected, more than just a face in the crowd. You actually got a sense of family and community with other believers. The people who have done this are the smartest people in the room because you've discovered the secret